But, you know, Congress blogger is sort of a newish genre that's come up the last couple of years. As we moved from opposition into a governance mode, people have wanted to know more and more information about just what is happening on the congressional side. We've had these big bills that, you know, they're designed to be frustratingly complex, and so that we don't get a lot of information about them disseminated to the public. They don't know what the target is, how they can move things around on the issues. So, and as David said, I'm doing it from outside DC. I'm based in Los Angeles. I think that has some of its advantages on certain levels. I'm not basically chasing senators and members of Congress and getting into scrums and you know, then in my haste writing a story that is essentially stenography. Basically, Ben Nelson said this, and that's the story. You know. Surprisingly enough, members of Congress, legislative staffers, people who are making these determinations in policy on the Hill are much more open and accessible than you think. It really does sometimes take simply making the phone call to someone if you find a policy that you're interested in, that you want to publicize, that you want to hear more about. You know, within the course of a few hours, you can get that information. You can talk to someone on the legislative side that will give you everything that you need to understand a particular issue. I remember doing this with the Franken amendment in the financial reform bill about credit rating agencies, which was kind of an under-the-radar topic. Not a lot of people were talking about it. I called up the Franken office and talked to the person who wrote, essentially, the amendment, worked with him through it on a few different issues, and continued to track it and follow it. There was an interesting thing that happened that not a lot of people reported on during that, is that Franken gave a speech on the floor of Congress about his amendment, and Roger Wicker, a right-wing Republican, was just sort of walking through the Senate gallery. You know, mostly the senators aren't there when they're, you know, giving these. He randomly walked through because he was giving the next speech, and he noticed and said, "Oh, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to co-sponsor that." And it really did happen that way, and reporting that and how interesting it was, I think, helped lead to a greater openness in terms of people talking about that bill, which ultimately the amendment passed. I mean, I would hear, you know, people, or I would read things that would say, well, the New York Times says this, and here's what Dave says in terms of the wisdom. And it was really just a function of staying plugged in at the local level and keeping your ear to the ground, and also being less credulous. When Luis Gutierrez says, I'm going to vote against the healthcare bill, nobody should ever have taken that seriously. I mean, there was no way that Luis Gutierrez was going to vote against it in the end, and it was important to know that and explain why and show your work when you were doing, when I was doing the webcam. I was saying that you know, this guy is bucking for some statement on immigration reform, and he ended up getting it, and then lo and behold, he voted for the bill. So that's something that I think Hill reporters have very little interest in, and they'd rather hear it from DC, but the local media was much more vital to that particular aspect of the debate than anyone else. So.